All right. Supply chains. That's what we're talking about. And they're terrible for everything. I mean, everything. It's eggs are up 12%, coffee's up 4%. It's hurting people. How is it specifically hurting your restaurant or restaurants in general?
Well, overall, all restaurants are facing the same issue, right? From paper goods to chemicals to oil to dry goods, perishables, non-perishables. Specifically for seafood, what you're seeing now is that restaurants are actually removing seafood altogether from their menus. And that being the backbone of our business, it just further puts pressure on the conversation related to A, how much we import. 80+% of the seafood in the United States is imported. So that's why we've got so many issues specific to that particular commodity. But what we're seeing isn't just related to the price of goods or the lack of supply. It's not a demand issue, right? So this idea that it's the demand that's creating pressure on the supply is 100% false, because we still have people curled up under their sheets here in California, afraid to leave their doors. We're not seeing demand on the restaurant side of things. Demand might be higher amongst things like Amazon, DoorDash, and any of these Silicon Valley companies that have totally stripped out Main Street. But it is strictly an issue of the inability to get products here by virtue of a poorly run supply chain, in addition to the labor woes, and then the regulations. You see it everywhere. These regulations are piling up in the background, and they're creating these barriers that are just that many more impedant, that much more sludge in the pipeline, preventing us from getting the products that we need to operate.
Okay, I want to pause on the seafood thing for a moment because I think a lot of people will be shocked
Yep.
by that. We import 80% of our seafood. Now, I'm not a restaurateur, certainly, and I'm definitely not an oceanographer, but I have seen like a map of the United States of America, and it seems like we have a couple of gigantic oceans on each coast. Why are we importing 80% of our seafood?
So that's a question. And the funny thing is, that just shows your brilliance right there, because most people don't realize that. The exclusive economic zone, the EEZ, which is 200 miles
Yeah.
off the coast of any country's ocean, we own the majority of the ocean by virtue of that coastline, just like you say. But instead of us actually properly, fit farming, aquaculture, or for that matter, just beefing up our wild capture fisheries, we import it all from China. And the fish that we do catch in the United States, we ship to China or Russia to process, or Korea or Indonesia to process, and then we buy it back from them, because in those countries, they don't deal with the labor issues and the unions that we deal with here. They don't have the regulations in place. So, and the funny thing is, we're the only country without an actual framework for open ocean farming, which is one of the most energy efficient, forward thinking ways that we can create high quality protein at a low cost. So instead of us doing it, because you've got Sierra Club, Greenpeace, you've got all these agencies that are boycotting, and these activists that are saying, no, there's no way we're going to farm in our oceans. Instead, we buy it from places like China, where not only do they farm in their oceans, but they're treating it with antibiotics and chemicals and malachite green. So we're just importing the crap that we're saying we don't want to grow in our oceans. And, it's just another way that we have gotten in our own way when it comes to progress. And seafood, I think, is one of the huge answers. Oil, and behind oil and automobiles, the third largest trade deficit is seafood.
Can you explain in what ways does a place like California, because I'm always encouraging people to move to a red state, in what ways do they hurt you? Do they throw roadblocks in front of what you're trying to do as a small business owner, as a restaurant owner?
Well, why don't I use the example of how I started Slapfish? So I started Slapfish in 2011 as a food truck. There were none of these kind of gourmet food trucks out there, and there was maybe like one or two, right? So the first thing I realized was I could quickly get in and drive around in one of these catering trucks that everybody thought was just flipping tacos to the construction guys, and I could avoid most of the regulations. So when I got in, I was paying like $200 a month in kind of overhead to the city and the health department to be slinging fish tacos and lobster rolls off of a food truck. I left 8 months later. I went from one to four food trucks. I left. I got out of the food truck game before I opened my first restaurant, because at that time, 8 months later, the government caught up. So many people started doing this. It was $4,000 a month, from $200 a
Oh,
month in a matter of 8 months. And that came in the form of California Coastal Commission fees, environmental fees, health department fees, you name it, right? So that's just one example right there. I got out quickly. Everybody asked me now, hey, I want to start my own restaurant company by starting a food truck. I want to do the same thing you did. I was like, the window is closed. You got to get in before the government realizes that they need to stick their hand in that pocket. They're now trying to ban the use of natural gas in commercial and residential settings in all of California. They've already piloted this in, guess where? Oakland, San Francisco, you name it. So What does this do? This hurts the lower class. This hurts the poor. This hurts those one-off mom and pop's Chinese food restaurants who now can't cook with an open fire wok. They're going to have to be microwaving their lo mein.
Hey, thanks so much for watching the first on YouTube. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and like and subscribe. You heard me. Like it, subscribe. You'll get a lot more of it and a lot more of me.